Good day. This is Teresa Fredericks from Growing Businesses Using Projects, bringing you yet another video, this time on MS Project 2016. We are setting up resources and adjusting their calendars. My intent with this and every video is to ensure that the ordinary person can understand what is being taught and apply it. Our agenda, we're going to be looking at the various types of resources, work, materials, and costs. There's the final resource of budget, but I'm not going to deal with it in this video. We're going to be setting up the resource sheet. We're going to adjust working time in a resources calendar, and we're going to document information for resources by using notes. So let's look at the various types of resources, starting with work. They're the people and equipment needed to complete a task, for instance, an electrician. What about materials? Materials refer to consumables that get used up as the project proceeds, for example, steel in a construction project. And then there's cost, which represents financial costs derived from specific tasks, for example, travel, hotels. In a MS project, there are two aspects of work resources that you have to pay attention to. One is their availability. This focuses on when the specific resources can work on tasks and how much can they perform. A major factor is the skills required. When we speak of availability, we're talking about, are they going to be available 100% of the time or 50% of the time? How much time can they allocate to this project? And then we talk about costs. The financial cost incurred by resources performing work on the project. Here, the budget for the project would be a major factor. So let's take a little deeper dive into work resources. Main consideration in naming people resources are who would see the resource names and how will they identify them. There are three main types of naming people resources. You can have the person's name, for instance, Tom Smith. You can have their job title, procurement specialist, and we can have a group of people who have common skills, for example, carpenters, laborers. If you have three, then they're 300%. Now, if you have laborers, you would not want to identify each laborer by name. So this is where you use the group. And the other type of work resource is equipment, for example, computer printers. So what are some of the differences? People have a limited amount of hours they can work in a day. For instance, they could work for 6 hours, 8 hours, and 12 hours if they work 8 hours full time and 4 hours overtime. People might be flexible in the tasks they perform and so can perform many tasks on the project. Equipment resources can undertake short or long duration work. Equipment could work for 24 hours, unlike people. They can have maintenance breaks and can be used by more than one resource, in which case you have to be careful that you are not allocating resources to the same resource to two people at the same day and the same time. So you have to be careful that you're not over allocating equipment resources. Equipment resources are more specialized, for instance, a computer prints, but as we said, they may be accomplishing multiple tasks. So what about material? Material relates to consumables used by the project, nails, steel, lumber. They used to track a fixed quantity or rate of consumption. Maximum unit values do not apply. You don't say of equipment 100%. There is no maximum value for it because they do not perform work. They have labels, can be measured. For instance, 4 reams of paper and have a per unit cost. The units of measure is an important gauge. You have to put how you're measuring it. With respect to costs, it represents a financial cost associated with a task in the plan. Such resources do no work and have no effect on the schedule of a task. You enter the cost value of a cost resource only when you assign it to a task. So what am I saying? If you have allocated $10,000 for airfare, and that involves the effort of several people on the project, it's only as each trip is undertaken, and you have the cost of that trip that is assigned to the task. Now there's an exception. If you do terms of reference and you send out for a consultant to do a particular task, and they send in a proposal and they are proposing a certain fixed amount of money for the entire work, you would have it as a cost item rather than a work item. They are not being paid for every hour or every week or by the month or something like that. They are constructed to be paid a particular flat fee. We said we're going to be looking at resource calendars. When you enter a resource in MS Project opens a resource calendar for each resource. The resource calendar is opened by MS Project for each resource, which controls the working and non-working times of the resource. They determine when work for a specific resource can be scheduled. A resource calendar takes precedence over the project calendar. A resource calendar can be assigned to a different calendar. A resource can be assigned to a different calendar rather than a project calendar. For example, you have a particular resource that has to work overnight. You could assign that person to the 24-hour calendar for that particular task. So why would we want to adjust resource calendars? We do adjustments in the calendars for flexi time. Our normal calendar time might be 8 to 5, but this person is not working like that, so that we can do an adjustment in this person's calendar. They may be on vacation leave for a particular period of time. We have to enter that. Other times when a resource is not available, they may be in training or attending a conference. We do some adjustments in their calendar for that. Adjustments can also be made for variations in the work week. Suppose somebody is coming in 3 days a week. All right, so we do that adjustment. The resource calendar has a higher priority than the base calendar, and the task calendar, which we haven't discussed as yet, has the highest priority. So I've opened MS Project on a trial project. Now I can right click and I can get to the resource sheet, or I can go in view and I will see the resource sheet here. So there are two ways of coming, at least two of coming up with the resource sheet. Now let us look at the resource sheet. I have gone ahead and entered some resources. So let's explain the different columns. Here you have the resource name. In this column you have type. Now Carl Smith is a person, so it is going to be work. There are 3 times work, material, and cost. The work resources do not have a material attached to it. MS Project will automatically put in initials. You may want to add to these initials if 2 people, for instance, start with C, you may want to put the second one. If it's CA, to differentiate them. Group, you can use groups for either internal or external or different departments or something like that. You can put in the groups and it will help you to monitor the work of the different groups. The max refers to availability on the project. 100% means they are fully employed on the project. If the day is 8 to 5, they are there 8 to 5. If you want, for instance, Tony Peters, he is only there 50% of the time. The standard rate is the rate that is the standard rate is the rate that is charged by the resource. The overtime is how much you have to pay them for overtime. So if they're working 8 hours and they have to work for 12 hours, that extra 4 hours, what is going to be that rate? Then you have a cost per use. Now the cost per use is normally not for people, but suppose to get that person to come, you have to pay them an extra 100 every time they come. Like if you have a doctor, his fee may be one thing in the office, but if he has to come by you, he may charge you something else. So we are showing a cost per use. But for instance, if you are using equipment and you're bringing heavy equipment onto a site, they're going to charge you for the cost of using the equipment, but they're going to charge you a fee to bring the equipment onto your site. That would be cost per use. In accrue is how is the payment made. All right, now you have a drop down. You can pay at the start, like if you buy material, when you buy the paint, the store is not going to let you leave without you paying for it. So that will be at the start, prorated as the project proceeds, if it's a weekly fee, a weekly payment or whatever have you, and at the end, if the person says you can pay me when I am finished. All right, so then you'll have how you are paid. Now I have all with this standard calendar, but if you have created, like for instance, in another project, we had created a John Smith project calendar, then you would assign it to the project calendar. All right, so what have we here? The only difference is when you look at work resources, you realize you have the standard fees, etc. Why carpenters? No, carpenters refer to groups of people. Normally, one person would have 100% availability. This states that there are three people, so it's 300% availability. We did not put a standard rate, so let us just insert a standard rate. Let us say $90 per hour. We're not charging any overtime, prorated, and it's time. Paint is a material resource. You must have the unit of measure, it's per gallon. It would not have a maximum, but it will have a standard rate, which is 150, which means for each gallon it's 150. And you pay it at the start before you leave the shop. Travel. Travel is cost. You do not have a rate because what you may have is a budget for travel. And as people travel, then you enter the cost of those particular trips in your cost estimate. So let me enter another cost resource. Let us say Tom Gray. Now, once you put it, I'm not entering a cost resource, I'm entering a people resource. Work will automatically come up because work is the default resource. If I wanted to change it, I just click there. You realize the initials would come up. MS Project would assume it's 100% unless you want to change it. If you want to change it, you just go in. You can either change it here or you can type in the change. You will put the standard, and for him, I'm going to put 60. No overtime. He doesn't have any cost per use. We leave him prorated. Now, the code could be linked to your internal accounting system. All right. So let's put notes to a resource. For instance, paint. You click on the resource. Now, there are two ways of getting to project information. You can go up here, project information, or you can right click and go down to project information. The dialog box comes up and you click on notes. So you can say, for instance, only painter, paint. You can put whatever you want and you realize it comes up here, right? So that you can see the note is only painter, paint. So what about adjusting the working time? You go to change working time. And once you have added resources, you realize everybody has a calendar. So suppose you want to change the time of, say, Carl Smith, you just go into that particular calendar. So you know he's not going to be available because he's going on vacation leave. So you put vacation leave, you put when it's starting, suppose it's starting on the 20th. And so you go to here, for instance, you're going to the 20th, you're going to click 20th, North 3, 2023. And it's going to end, for instance, on the 24th, North 3, 2023. And that exception is you click OK. When you go back into change working time, you go back into Carl Smith, you realize it has been entered. Default week on the calendar, he's not working, is a non-working day. All the vacation leave has been entered as non-working days. I have to stop here, but if you want to make any other adjustment, go back to my video that shows how to make adjustments. Like for instance, if you want a 4-day week or something like that, it's the same procedure. You just go to the particular resources calendar. If you like my content, give me a thumbs up and see you in the next video.